So today we're going to be looking at a region or a culture that is called Mesopotamia. All right. So one of the things that I'm going to focus on really heavily is going to be the geographic relationship of things. Okay. And so you guys have just finished building this Dymaxion globe, and so you understand the Dymaxion globe both unfolded and folded up. Okay, the folded up one should look a little more like what planet Earth might look like, but the unfolded version should give you kind of a relationship of what the pieces look like in relationship to all of the continents. Okay, so what I want you guys to be aware of is that Mesopotamia is right here. Okay, when we get to the Google Earth component a little bit later, I'm going to ask you to be completely clear, okay, as to what this body of water is, that body of water, that body of water, that one, and that one. Okay? So I need you guys to know what those bodies of water are, because those bodies of water kind of give you a frame of reference for where everything is there in that region. Okay? So all right, so this is a different view of the geographic location of Mesopotamia, okay? And you can take a look here, and this might be a clearer picture for you. There's the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf. This is the Arabian Peninsula, Africa, Asia Minor, and Asia, all right? Europe above there. So this is kind of the area where the earliest civilizations that recorded history, or at least that we have found their recorded history of, started. Okay? So it lies along two river systems, okay, that are flowing into the Persian Gulf. Okay? So I think I got a close-up map of that in a minute. And there's two rivers that are associated with Mesopotamia, the Tigris and the Euphrates. So some of this stuff you might have already learned in, like, maybe a history class in high school, maybe. How many of you guys have kind of covered this at some point in your earlier education? So a few of you, but some of you have not. So, okay. All right. To the south and west, the area faded out into what is Arabia. Okay, that's the Arabian Peninsula, and you can see, I'll use my mouse to kind of point at stuff, that the Arabian Peninsula consists of a lot of desert. You can see an entire sort of swath of desert, right? Look at the area above that line there and that line there. So that looks very dry, doesn't it? Okay, and so this is the Arabian Peninsula right in here, and it is a fairly dry region, and there wasn't a lot initially going on there. Okay, so to the west and to the north, so west and north, were the fertile plains of Syria. That's going up towards the Mediterranean. Okay, so that's kind of heading over in that direction. To the east, you can see sort of that it looks like a mountainous region all along in here. All right, so those were the Armenian highlands, and to the southeast lay the Persian Gulf, which is this area back in here. All right. So taking a closer look at it, you can start to see the river systems and the fact that there's a body of water right here. Right? But the rivers flow this way. So what that tells you is that there is a high point of land somewhere in here. Right? Water doesn't flow uphill. All right? So that's kind of an important observation. You also start to get an idea of the geography of the area. You can see, right, the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, and you can see the mountainous region, right, that lies to the northeast. You can also see how close it is to the Mediterranean. in a day or two, we'll be talking about how close it is to this green thing right in here that looks a little like a snake, right? That's Egypt. So the meaning of the word Mesopotamia comes from the Greek, believe it or not. Okay? And I mentioned this in a different class, but you know, you guys are aware of tourism and sort of travel around the globe and stuff, and you know, you've seen pictures of maybe your friends standing by Machu Picchu, right? What's kind of weird to sort of think of is the idea of the Greeks, who we also consider ancients, traveling to the regions of Mesopotamia to look at their ruins. To me, that's like, wow, that's trippy, man, because that's what, you know, I've gone to go see Machu Picchu. I've gone to go see many of the Mayan sort of cities, right? And I look at that stuff. I look at the colonial stuff that was built even closer to our time period, and you know, I think of myself as kind of a tourist. And it's kind of strange to think that these ancient Greeks, maybe wearing a toga or something, were traveling and doing the same thing 2,000 years ago. So, okay, so the two rivers again are the Tigris and the Euphrates. You can see the Tigris lies to the northeast, the Euphrates lies to the southwest. All right. One of the things about this region of Mesopotamia is, and this is something, again, you might have learned in high school or somewhere else, is that a portion of it is referred to as the Fertile Crescent. Okay? So they're picturing this thing as this sort of crescent-shaped thing. It goes this way. It runs along the edges of the Mediterranean, and then it follows the Tigris and Euphrates river valleys down to the Persian Gulf. All right? Remember, what were the key things? There was like several things that I mentioned that created this notion of civilization as compared to nomadic tribes or little villages somewhere. Well, they're cities, but, you know, there was this idea of not having to move anymore, right? So this notion of agriculture. There was this idea of stratification, where there was maybe a ruler and people that were beneath him or her, and people beneath them, and so on and so forth. So take a look at those things. There was the idea of creating some sort of a written language. Those were things that spawned civilization. And so here, one of the things that's important to note is that the Fertile Crescent provides a place where there is water and where you can grow crops without having to move, okay, and raise farm animals. So one thing that's kind of important to put it into perspective with today's world is, where was Mesopotamia in relationship to the stuff that we know of today? So we know there's a lot of problems in Syria, right? We see that in the news, or we hear about it, or we see something in one of the social media sites on it. We know there's been some issues that have gone on recently in Turkey, and most of us kind of associate the Persian Gulf possibly with an area where there's been quite a bit of war, right? We've fought 2 unofficial wars there, all right? Desert Storm was one. I can't remember what the other one was. In either case, so it's important to kind of see where current day countries are and where Mesopotamia existed, all right? So Mesopotamia, essentially, it spanned between Iraq, Iran, and Syria, and went up towards Turkey. Oops, I think I went the wrong way. Yep, I did. All right, so relative time period and geopolitical conditions. So the first civilizations in Mesopotamia predate the Egyptian. Oops, I see a misspelling there. Before. See it? Oops, I got to fix that. Sorry. But the first civilizations in Mesopotamia began before the Egyptians by 500 years. Okay? And so they were there kind of before the pharaohs. The region is not anywhere near as isolated as Egypt. So we'll look at a map later and we'll kind of take a look at what's kind of around Egypt and what are the factors around it that could influence the region. And we'll take a look at what was going on in Mesopotamia and what were the things that were around it. Okay? So isolation is one of the things that sort of fosters lack of disruption. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers were rivers that were not predictable. They were subject to drought and flood. So that was another thing that had a huge impact on the development of the culture and the way they saw the world and how they built. So it's important to note that because when a river floods, right, and if it overflows its bank, it destroys everything. Remember, we talked about early on about how, this notion of civilizations and cities were one of the key things about those was this sort of separation from nature and conquering of nature. Well, it's near impossible to conquer a flood. We don't do it. I mean, it's happening right now in the Midwest and different regions of the United States in our current day. All right? One of the other things, again, this relates to not being as isolated and well protected as Egypt, is there were tribal peoples around that region. Okay? And you can think of a tribal people as kind of being pre-civilization. They had villages and there were groups of people, but they were nowhere near as organized as a place that might be a city. And so those surrounding areas, created an impact by raiding and invasion into Mesopotamia. Because of the conditions, there are 4 different time periods that make up that 3,000-year span, okay, in Mesopotamia. Whereas in Egypt, right, the Egyptian culture, that same approximate 3,000 years was the same culture. Pretty much the same religion. They built in different ways, but the ruling class was sort of similar. Things didn't change anywhere near as much in Egypt because they were far more isolated. Okay? So just for reference, the 4 major periods that we'll be looking at in Mesopotamia are the Sumerian Babylonian period, the Assyrian, the Neo-Babylonian, and the Persian. Okay? And for those of you that have grown up in this country, maybe you went to church, right? Some of those words you're going to kind of be aware of being kind of maybe something you would have read in the Bible or in... 13 minutes. Oh, all right. We're almost out of time? Oh, my timer didn't go off. All right, let me turn this thing off. All right, so I'm going to stop there. I'll close with one thing. So, anybody ever heard of the Good Samaritan? Being a Good Samaritan? Yes? Well, being a Good Samaritan relates to Samaria. And I'm going to stop this so that I don't go over. And where's the stop button?